Imagine you're about to give birth and there's no hospital, no ultrasound, no epidural, no antibiotics, no C-section, no emergency room, and no number you can call that guarantees a team will arrive in minutes. There is no team, only a shelter. A fire if someone kept it alive, water if someone thought ahead, and a few people around you who might be calm or might be terrified. And one person everyone suddenly hopes is nearby, the woman who has seen this before, because in the ancient world childbirth wasn't a personal milestone. It was a survival event, and the fact that you exist means ancient humans survived it, often enough to fill the planet with people. So the real question isn't how did they do it once, it's how did they do it again and again, generation after generation, without modern doctors. Here's the first twist. No doctors is true in the modern sense, but misleading in the human sense. Because humans don't need modern credentials to create expertise when something repeats. When it's high stakes, and when mistakes are deadly. Societies produce specialists, and childbirth is exactly that kind of event. So ancient people didn't give birth alone, as a rule. They gave birth with midwives and experienced attendants, older women, caregivers. People whose knowledge came from repetition and pattern recognition. And that matters because human childbirth is unusually difficult compared to many animals. Humans walk upright, which reshapes the pelvis. Humans evolved big brains, which means big baby heads. And birth becomes a brutal geometry problem, where a large head has to pass through a tight, curved bony pathway, often rotating as it goes. Which is why labor can last hours, and why problems like prolonged labor, obstruction, and heavy bleeding can become deadly. Add another problem on top. Human babies are born helpless, unable to regulate temperature well, vulnerable to cold and infection immediately. So ancient people weren't just trying to deliver a baby. They were trying to keep two vulnerable humans alive at the same time, one exhausted and injured, one fragile and brand new, and that's exactly why birth became a community-managed process, rather than a private moment. Because if a mother dies, the newborn often loses its best chance of survival, and the group loses an adult. And if the newborn dies, the future shrinks, so everyone has a stake in the outcome. What did ancient births look like on the ground? As far as cross-cultural patterns suggest, people likely chose the safest private-ish space available inside a hut, inside a sheltered room, or in a protected corner away from wind predators and chaos, because warmth matters and shock kills. A fire isn't just comfort, but temperature control and safety. Water matters because dehydration and exhaustion are real. And bedding matters because recovery begins immediately. And something modern people underestimate matters too, controlling who is present. Because many societies have rules about who can enter the birth space, what must be done, what's forbidden, and who can touch mother and baby. And while that can look like superstition from the outside, it often functions like a safety protocol written in cultural language, limiting visitors, reduces chaos, and reduces exposure. Keeping the event in experienced hands reduces risk. Enforcing rest afterward improves survival, even if the explanation is spiritual. Then there's the birth position. And modern assumptions mislead us here because we're trained to imagine childbirth lying flat on the back. But historically, many cultures used upright or supported positions, squatting, kneeling, sitting supported, leaning forward, being held under the arms, because gravity helps and those positions can change pelvic angles. And some groups use supports like ropes, poles, or stool-like setups, not because they were fancy, but because they were practical. And this doesn't require anatomy textbooks, only repeated observation. When we do it this way, it tends to go better. And in a world where better means survival, those patterns become tradition. What did midwives actually do? Not magic constant physical work, supporting weight and posture, helping the mother shift positions, bringing water, maintaining warmth, reducing panic. managing the space so it stays controlled, and perhaps most importantly managing time. Because prolonged labor isn't just painful but dangerous. And even without modern monitors experienced, attendants can recognize when labor isn't progressing and the mother is weakening. You don't need a machine to notice that. Someone has been in hard labor too long and is losing strength. And in a modern hospital, monitoring is a device, while in an ancient setting, monitoring is the midwife's eyes. Now we have to be honest about the part everyone tries to skip. Sometimes mothers died. Sometimes babies died. Maternal and newborn mortality were higher than today. And without antibiotics, safe surgery, and blood replacement, some complications that are survivable now were fatal then. So ancient birth wasn't beautiful and natural in the romantic sense. It could be terrifying. But humans persisted because enough births succeeded, and because societies built systems that improved the odds. And here's another modern misunderstanding. The system doesn't end when the baby arrives. Because historically the hours and days after delivery could be the most dangerous bleeding. Infection, fever, dehydration, exhaustion. So postpartum care was not optional. The mother needed warmth, hydration, rest, and protection. And newborns needed warmth, feeding, and constant attention. And this is where ritual can be functional. Isolation periods, controlled visitors, special post-birth rest rules, and restrictions on handling can reduce exposure and enforce recovery. So don't confuse the explanation with the effect. Because the explanation might be spiritual, but the behavior can still save lives. Then the newborn. A newborn's biggest threats are brutally simple: cold, infection, neglect. So ancient newborn survival depended on simple high-impact actions. Wrap the baby. Keep it close, feed early, feed often. Because breastfeeding isn't only nutrition, but hydration, warmth, immune support, and constant contact. And because human babies are helpless for a long time, childcare often becomes shared. Grandmothers, aunts, older siblings, neighbors. This isn't just culture, it's survival math. Because a mother recovering from birth has limited energy, and a network increases survival. At this point you might ask whether ancient people had anything like medicine for pain or complications. And while they didn't have modern analgesics, humans have always experimented. Supportive positions reduce discomfort. Warmth and massage can help. Breathing and pacing help. Calm helps. Some societies used herbal preparations with mixed effectiveness. But the deeper point is social support reduces panic. Panic wastes energy, and energy is life in labor. Then civilizations appear, and the no doctors idea becomes even less accurate. Because ancient Egypt, Greece, and Rome did have medical roles and written traditions. And childbirth shows up everywhere because it's central to society. Egypt treated fertility and birth as core to life, and we see evidence of structured assistance: midwives, attendants, practical routines alongside protective traditions, because birth was dangerous and precious. In the Greek world, medicine develops along parallel tracks with temple healing and early observation-based approaches like regimen and diet. And childbirth sits right in the middle, with people using every tool available rather than choosing one ideology. Rome scales organization and infrastructure. And while they still didn't have modern obstetrics, public health basics like cleaner water, bathing, sanitation, stable food, and organized caregiving indirectly improved survival. Medicine isn't only what's in your hand, it's the environment your body lives in. So if ancient people had no modern doctors, how were babies born? They were born through the oldest human medical system of all: experience. Midwives, community support, and traditions that preserved what seemed to work. Because the hospital is new, but the teamwork is ancient. And the reason you exist is that, most of the time, it worked often enough.